Hi, my name is Stephan, and today I'll be talking to you about AI and market research. This is actually based on a ebook that I wrote with exactly the same title, which discusses around how AI can improve market research on a continent. This will be a summarized version, so still go and get the book if you can. It's online and it's free as well. But this will be a quick version of that and a talk of some of my thoughts around the subject. So let's go into it and see what points we're going to cover. So we'll be looking over the state of market research in Africa. So 2 ways AI could also improve market research and how we can make informal settings formal. But then also how Survey 54 is contributing to this on a wider basis. So a bit about me, I think it's always great to understand the speaker that's actually speaking and their credentials. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Survey 54. We're an on-demand insights platform that aims to help companies that are outside of the continent, also within the continent, understand their consumers and their customers much more easier. In a past life, I've worked for Uber, leading a product called Uber Central, but also was one of the first employees at a company called SurveyMonkey within the London office. But then I've also done my master's in innovation and management at Loughborough University with a focus on connected devices and also artificial intelligence. So I'm really passionate about innovation, about technology, and about how that can impact emerging markets with a particular focus on the continent. And I'm originally from Ghana, but born and raised in the UK. So let's start off with the state of the market research industry. I've been in this industry for a couple of years now, so I'm still a baby, but I'm still learning also. But what is the state of how market research is done? And just to give you some context, market research is not just an industry in silo, but it's actually what every company needs to do, no matter what form of research, to understand who their customers are, who their clients are, what they need, what they want, where they're going, what are the trends. Market research is in every facet of the journey for a company, just to understand who their customers are and how can we serve our customers better. And that's what I believe market research is. So one, market research is super expensive on a continent. Comparative to most Western places, you can get a consumer at $1 per response, right? But then in countries within the continent, it could be $5 to $8. This is due to a few different reasons. One, that face-to-face, 70% of is carried out, is still done face-to-face. But then also it's high tech, it's high internet cost as well if you want to do it through online, right? So that's still a barrier we need to get over. But then there's also a few things is that companies do not believe in the market penetration or that mobile can cover the whole market. And that's super true as well, right? There's barriers in language, there's barriers in cultural nuances, but then also it's those that are, you're really segmented towards just the city. So outside of some of those city areas, in the rural or poorer areas, internet connectivity or even someone being able to text back is super expensive, right? So this becomes a massive barrier for companies to do frequent market research. And this is super hard, right? To reach respondents pretty quickly at a cheaper cost. And would companies rather spend money in a market where they know they can get a return, or expanding to a market where they actually don't know and pay a whole lot of money to understand, to see if their actual respondents are not actually their customers? So these are 3 things with market research that we're aware of on the continent, and it's stuff that we actually want to fix. So what have I noticed, right? So market research is actually not carried out on a frequent basis. And this is due to high costs, as I've mentioned before, but also it's super labor intensive. So imagine you need to do a survey with 1,000 people, and you have to hire 100 people to go out there, or hire maybe 50 people or 10 people to reach 1,000 people. That would take quite some time. So it's actually not done on a frequent basis. It's done like 2-3 major projects in a year, right? And people are changing constantly. The world is changing constantly. So you need to keep up with your consumers, but it's super hard if you do not do that on a frequent basis. So most of it is done based on assumption. Cross-border surveys are super hard as well. If a company in South Africa wants to find out about young Gen Z millennials in Mozambique, right? There's a language barrier, there's a cultural barrier in understanding. You would have to go through the whole process of going down the agency route and getting them to understand, and then finding out those nuances, and this takes some time. But how do we do that very quickly and very efficiently? Efficiently. So 80% of market research is still carried out by agencies, and it's really old school. And it's not just old school on a continent. Most of these agencies are still old school outside, right? And they're not super tech driven, which is one of the issues. And that's why market research is done quite infrequently, and on more of a long-term basis than more on a frequent basis. So how market research should be conducted, where the future is, right? And we've seen that the future is mobile. And there's a few ways in which we reach out to the respondent: through SMS or USSD, through WhatsApp, through voice, and also through mobile app. And I'll go deeper into these as we go along. So if you don't know, SMS is a simple text message. USSD is a way to reach a person without them having to pay for it. WhatsApp is what a lot of people use on a continent as well. It's different in other areas. In Ethiopia, they like Telegram. I know that there's a few WhatsApp competitors within some of the townships in South Africa are creeping up, such as Moyo or Ioba, right? That's built by MTN. But also voice surveys using IVR as well. But then also we have a data-like mobile app, which doesn't consume so much data for the respondent, in which they're able to respond at a low data cost. So this is where the future is going. And this should be the future of market research in general. Should be focused on purely on mobile and how we can extract data and consumer and customer respondents answers from mobile. So what are the two ways that AI can actually help and benefit, right? But let's introduce sentiment analysis. So can we replace face-to-face interaction and understand emotion behind some of the answers? So how do you get this in place, right? So let's take a country like Nigeria. So Nigeria has over 500 languages. How then do we pick around what language do we start with, right? And in a sense of it's understanding a language and then understanding the emotion behind the language. So one of the common languages in Nigeria is maybe Pidgin English, right? Which is kind of a consensus language that people from different tribes may speak, right? And how do we say, okay, let's use Pidgin English as an example of a language that we can look at and we can understand the sentiment behind. Most face-to-face surveys are done because one, they need to see the environment. Two, they want to see the people and see them in the environment. And then three, to understand the emotion. How then do we take number three and then actually say, hey, okay, well, you want to understand the context and the emotion behind some of the answers that the respondent is giving you? Could we do that through voice? And could we do a survey over IVR, but get our algorithms to listen to the sentiment using natural language processing to then understand the sentiment behind it, essentially. And then understand, and then give the client this sentiment so you can see if that respondent is happy, sad, miserable, joy, they have joy, they're happy, they're excited, essentially. And that's one of the things that we are working towards. So here's a quick video. So it's a bit of a sales video, but here's a quick video of how our platform works. So hopefully you can hear it with the volume as well.
Then pick your country. Step 2. Write your question in any language. Don't worry, we'll do the translation for you. Step 3. We use automated technology to call respondents and measure sentiment during the conversation.
Yariana bana yefrɛ COVID-19 ɛwɔ Ghana ha no wonim bi bɛ wobɛkɔ a ɛbɛhwɛ sɛ wonya bi ana
ayasɛm ha coronavirus deɛ na mempɛ mu sɛ menya bi sɛ mete sɛ yɛka ho asɛm wɔ radio so sɛ yɛareɛ kwaa na ɛkɔ soro a ɛyɛ kwa na ma ɛhu abɔ me ne sɛ nti mebɔ me ho mmɔden bia sɛ ɛberɛ biara no na tena fie na menyɛ nneɛma bi a ɛbɛma menya saa yadeɛ yi bi ɛsiane sɛ menyɛ bi a mennim nea mɛyɛ sɛ mede bɛkɔ hospital sɛ mɛtena fie na mato me ho po na matwe me ho afi me nkɔla ho mennim nti mpaeɛ na mebɔ nyame sɛ mɛma ɔma saa yadeɛ bi ɛmmɛ me ne m'abusua koraa.
You can measure emotional sentiment on the platform to understand the context behind the answers. And that's it. You'll have more realistic results to make accurate, data-driven decisions.
Perfect. So if we just go back a little bit, right? So what we've done is actually translated the language from Tree to English so the client can understand. And then we've looked at words during when the lady was speaking. And this is actually Tree. So this is actually a language that's in Ghana. Then we've translated that to English and then took the sentiment from the English and then measured the sentiment, right? But in a scenario where it was just a Ghanaian client or a client that understood Tree as a language, we would then use a sentiment in some of those words to then measure the sentiment as well. So it's actually training our algorithm to actually understand, okay, what words should we pick out and what is the sentiment behind these words? And that's one thing that we're looking to do. So how do we do that with other languages? So we've just done it for Tree for this one, but then how do we do it for Yoruba, for Zulu, for Xhosa, right? And how do we apply this sentiment to other languages, which will make it easier to get that really that background and that context and that emotional sentiment that a researcher is looking for when they go and see somebody face to face, or when they do a group when they do a virtual focus group. So that's one of the things that we're solving now, and it's working quite well. And it helps us move away from in this COVID era of face to face.
Then,
so how does sentiment help at scale? So it's less face to face surveys to understand context and emotion, but using our sentiment tool within other applications, it could be in social listening online. Right, people still write their languages, even if they're native languages online, but also it could be used in customer service and understanding how that customer feels about you, so your actual customer, not a new consumer, and getting their sentiment behind that. Can they be more expressive? Can you then predict if that customer will drop off or not, or if they like your service or not? This sentiment tool can be used in different kinds of analysis, not just in the market research realm, but then also in other facets of your business. And then we're on a mission to build a library of learned languages with our tool. So as we go from one language, our next would be Swahili, and understanding words and tones from that language, so that we can understand if somebody's happy or sad, or they have joy or they're excited. And that's one way where that element of face-to-face surveys is removed. So a traditional method on how actually market research is conducted through an agency. So market research creates a survey with an agency. Agency does a face-to-face survey, usually takes about 2-3 weeks. The agency then does analysis on the survey and shares a report with the client. And that could take about 2 weeks. So all in all, it could take about 5 weeks. And this is not frequent, right? And this could take a lot longer. This is more of like an average time. It's more of like an average time frame. So that's a traditional method. And how do we speed this up? So what's another way? So we can also introduce advanced insights, right? So you saw from the first video, the minute that you know, we have the data and the voice, you know, we can then do some quick insights, right? But how is that actually conducted? So it's actually using our tool and using more of an unstructured method to actually get insights within the raw data, right? So it's using unstructured and structured methods within AI to reach that raw data set and pull out insights. But then also it's merging open data. So if I was an alcohol brand and I wanted to understand my market, right? And I realized that white wine is drunk amongst men that are 40, right? Just made that up. But then I wanted to see how much wine is created within a certain place and also imported, right? So locally made, but then imported, and do those numbers match my demographic of consumption rates? So advanced analytics can solve that problem. And also prediction of trends based on historical data sets. How then do we use AI and advanced analytics to do that? And it's by using unstructured and structured data sets, algorithms to actually look at that raw data set and then make sense of it. So here's an example that we done recently with one of our clients that was a snack brand. And so some of the structured ways that we looked at it is saying, hey, look at what males like and look at what, look at the male, look at the age, and look at what they preferred, right? It's a very simple survey. Do you prefer snack A or B? And then sort of pick up some of the open insights as well. And then put that in there as well. And this is what we got as some results. So it's females preferred snack B. And this was unstructured. So it was looking at age, looking at gender, and then looking at the snack that they answered. So this could easily really be done using just using an Excel. But how do we speed it up so there's no human intervention whatsoever? It's by using that advanced those advanced analytics. And then we can say, hey, okay, well, this is what they preferred because of this, but then they, you know, we've seen that they preferred because of that taste. So, you know, they like that taste, so that taste can then be attributed to another snack, which they also like, right? So then it opens up a whole new realm of data, which we're able to construct through using using unrestricted algorithm methods to allow that to happen, essentially. So how do we make informal data formal? And the reason why I say informal data is because 80 to 90% of, let's say, retail markets or trade, which is a better word, outside of outside of developed markets, well, markets within Africa are actually informal, right? So it means that most people buy and sell within markets where sales are not being tracked, right? They might be being tracked personally, but they're not being tracked using a scanner or using a card, right? They're more so tracked using cash, which is super hard to track. So how can we make this data more formal to understand what people are buying? And using a method such as image recognition and repetitive learning. So it's actually using computer vision to understand, and image recognition is under computer vision as a form of artificial intelligence, is using this to understand purchasing within formal markets. How is that done, right? Is it done by taking images of what you've bought in these informal markets to understand price, understand difference, understand the consumer that's buying, understand where, the location, etc., right? This is a way that, you know, it can be solved. And governments are really blind to how much money goes through these informal markets every day. And how much is spent, but who's spending? Why are they spending? Why did they decide to go to these informal markets rather than a retail store? This could, if you need to give a South African context, this is quite, it's known as more of the shops within townships that are informal as well, that don't scan, right? That just use cash as a base for transaction rather than card. There's also understanding the buying behavior and street sellers, what's being sold, essentially, what's being bought. And then it's building an image library per country and understanding what is actually being, what transactions are actually happening. Can computer vision solve this by using the power of what I said before, mobile, right? And getting our audience to actually build this library for us. And that's one of the visions that we have. But this may be all talk. Is this actually happening? Is this actually being done today? And it is. Moving away from our side, but more on a government side. So digitizing government departments, such as like companies register, birth certificates, IDs, countries within the continent are actually doing this today, very much so, in the sense of now they're more digitalizing to track their people, which is a great thing in the sense of understanding, you know, age within a place, average age, getting more detail from censuses. But then also fintech companies are working within informal traders, right? So working with QR codes, working with mobile money, using these as transaction pieces. So this data is starting to build up so we can understand these markets more so than before, and understand what transactions are happening, where they're happening. And this stuff is important to actually start building these data sets. So, so AI can be applicable within these markets. What are some of Survey 54 contributions? So started testing out our applications within popular languages spoken in West Africa. So as I mentioned, such as Pidgin, Tree, Yoruba, essentially, and then we're actually building up an audience of survey takers across Africa using different partners. And this helps us empower our audience to actually go out and do things like take images, go out and do things like take surveys and do tasks, which then helps us build a really good data set. So our algorithm can be learning and we're feeding it with information. So then we can start doing that predictable data side and understanding trends. Also just feeding our machine so we can pick out insights from raw data. And then we can understand these audiences more so. We believe that Africa is, you know, one of the frontier markets and maybe one of the final frontiers amongst India, Pakistan, Brazil. And we want to be at the forefront of that. Our mission is, how do we understand every African consumer? How do we understand, how do we allow you as a company to understand your customers more? And AI is a very big part of that from what I've discussed. And we're really focused on our sentiment. We're really focused on our computer vision. We're really focused on our advanced analytics that will help research companies and those that do research or want to do research on a regular basis, be able to understand their customers and their clients more so on the continent and in a more frequent basis. But thank you very much. And if you do have any questions, we can speak after this talk has ended, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.